At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
So here we are in the post-CES, post-NIAS afterglow.
Post-Utah.
Post-Utah. Yeah, can you talk about that?
I can say that I was in Utah for a few days last week to drive the Honda Passport, and you'll have to wait till next week to hear what I think about it.
Okay.
But I can say this, that the landscape in Utah is absolutely unreal.
Is it your first time in Utah?
Yeah, it's the first time I've been out there. I've flown over that region countless times because the flight path between LAX and Detroit Metro Airport goes directly over, like pretty much over the area where I was. And so it was amazing to see it from ground level or in some cases, from like 2,000 feet up looking down into a canyon. Yeah.
Yeah, it's impressive landscape out there. And unfortunately, you didn't get to try the skiing, but from what I hear, it's really, really good.
Yeah. And right in the area where we were around Moab, they don't actually have a whole lot of snow. It's kind of a desert region.
Yeah.
But, not that far away, there's some pretty amazing skiing, Park City and other places. There was interesting stuff. And we'll talk more about the Passport next week.
Yeah. I mean, in the meantime, we've got lots of stuff we can actually offer our opinions on this week. And that includes what we've been driving. So, Sam, you've been in a couple of different cars, one big, one small. So why don't you start us off?
Yeah. It was my turn to get into the new Kia Forte EX. And, I largely concur with most of what you said a few weeks ago when you had a chance to drive it. I've grown quite fond of Kia and Hyundai models over the last several years, and particularly the Kias. I really like the way this Forte EX looks. I'd like to see Kia do another hatchback version of this Forte, like they did with the last generation with the Forte 5. I don't know if they will, just because for whatever silly reasons, Americans don't seem to want to buy that form factor. But it's a really good car overall. I would like to see, a little more powerful engine available in it. As we talked about last time, it's just the 1.4 liter naturally aspirated engine in there right now, which is, it's adequate. I think most people that are going to be interested in a car in this segment will probably be more than satisfied with the performance you get from it.
I felt like it was a half liter bigger almost. It almost felt like more like a 1.8. So I was impressed with that.
Yeah, it did feel stronger than you would expect a naturally aspirated 1.4 to feel. I'd like to see, maybe a 1.6 or, a 1.4 turbo, something like that, with maybe 160, 170 horsepower. I think that would be a great pairing with this thing, because it's got a good platform, good chassis, really nice interior, for what is, effectively a close to entry level car. The EX is the top trim level, so this one was about $25,000, but it was really well equipped with sunroof and all the driver assist stuff and everything else. I liked it a lot.
It's interesting. I was reading through Car and Driver, the latest issue where they do the 10 best, and I think their take on the Forte was that it actually, it's a cheap car that looks cheaper than it is or feels cheap. And maybe I'm wrong. There was another Kia that they bashed that way. But I was like, well, that didn't match up with my experience. And I wonder if it's just that the EX trim, which is what we've both driven now, is nicer than, a lot nicer than some of the other lower trims. Because Kia is very good at that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, it does feel, at least in the EX trim, it feels like more car than you would expect at that price point. I guess the one other thing that I might that did strike me when I was driving it is it does feel like they maybe reduced the amount of sound insulation a little bit, because on the highway in particular, it did feel like there was a little more road noise coming through than I recall. I mean, it's been, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years since I drove the last previous generation Forte. But it felt like there was maybe a little more noise coming through, particularly, like around the greenhouse, I think maybe they made the glass a little thinner, and maybe, didn't use acoustic glass like you would find on some higher level cars. But it wasn't it wasn't terrible. It wasn't objectionable. It just seemed like, I guess, compared to, some of the more premium stuff I've been driving lately, it did seem like there was, a little more of the outside world intruding.
And what kind of fuel economy are you getting?
I got about 34 miles per gallon.
That's not too bad.
Yeah. So, again, considering, this is not a hybrid or anything, it's just, just a basic vehicle. It was great. I was very impressed with it. And I think, I think for somebody, that's looking to maybe buy a new car for the very first time, I think the Rio that I drove last month, was probably, even in a little better choice. It's a little bit smaller. It's certainly cheaper,
or more
Rio affordable.
That I was thinking that Car and Driver bashed.
That could be.
Yeah.
The Rio definitely, but the Rio cost, the one I drove was, I think, like just over 19 grand.
Right.
So it's a, much more affordable car. It's one of the few cars you can get anymore for under $20,000 new. So, I think when you look at it in that context of what it costs, what the Rio cost, I think that you're getting a great value for your money on that one. And this one, is a little more expensive. It's a little bit bigger, feels a little more premium. And I think if it just had, just a touch more power and, maybe just a touch thicker glass to drown out some of the exterior sound, I think people would really love it.
Or just, that car and a set of those foam earplugs.
Well, just turn up the stereo.
Yeah, there you go. And then eventually you'll blow away your hearing, so you won't have any problem anyway. All right, so the other car you had was the 2019 Toyota Avalon. So
yeah, and I've driven many Avalons over the years. I think the first time I ever drove an Avalon was back in the mid 90s, and I think that was probably the second generation after they went to the Avalon nameplate. Prior to that, I think let's see, what did they had some other branding on their biggest. Toyota had some other branding on their biggest sedan, but back in the mid 90s, I don't know if you remember, like the second gen Avalon, it had very upright sides. The greenhouse. It looked, when you look at it from straight ahead or straight behind, it almost looked square.
It was quite a Buick.
It even out Buicked most Buicks.
Yeah.
It was not a graceful looking car.
But it was an outstanding car.
Its
mission.
Yeah, it was based on the Camry platform. It was dead reliable. It was thoroughly unexciting, but it did everything you expected a Toyota sedan to do, which was to run forever with minimal intervention. Aside from some oil changes and filters.
So many old men with hats drove those. They were always like that light bluish green, and they were always doing like 10 under the limit in front of me when I had places to go. Yeah.
So
I remember that vividly.
the new Avalon that debuted last year, is very much unlike that in many respects. And like I think let's see, from the side, from the profile view or from a rear 3/4 view, I think it's really, really attractive. I think it's a very good looking sedan. From the front, I think it suffers from the same disease that a lot of recent generation Toyotas do, in that, it's got too much grille and it's maybe a bit overstyled in the front, or maybe a lot overstyled. It does have a tremendous amount of grille. And I think, maybe toning that down a little bit would not hurt. But once you get inside it and drive it, it's on the latest TNGA platform. I think it's the biggest iteration yet of the TNGA. It's got the Toyota 3.5 liter V6 in there with about 280 horsepower or so. It's an outstanding full size sedan.
Right. I was gonna say it's kind of hard to dislike anything about that.
Yeah, and it like the Camry and even the latest generation Prius, it actually drives really well. It's got good balance, good decent feel to it. Good performance. The infotainment system is much better than what we've had in Toyotas in recent years. It's still lacking in some stuff. It does now finally have Apple CarPlay support, and word is that it will eventually get Android Auto support, although for whatever reason they have not yet implemented that. So it's just a really good big sedan if that's what you're interested in.
Yeah, I mean, so the last couple generations of Avalon have really, for me, they've filled the void left by Oldsmobile. They feel like a really nice Cutlass used to in that sense. Like they're stylish. They hint at being sporty, or they say like, we wanted you to think this was sporty. Without actually really being terribly. So I mean, they're fine. They don't embarrass themselves.
Yeah, I mean, the previous generations, they, especially the last generation, kind of had the design going in the right direction.
Yeah.
The chassis was still a bit too soft and uninspired. And they really fixed that with the new one.
Yeah, and I think like all of that together, it's really come into its own as sort of like it is just an Uber Camry in that sense. It does the things the Camry does. It looks very much like the Camry. It's like the big gulp Camry.
Yeah.
But
especially the grille, it definitely looks like it's gulping air.
That's for sure. And it's weird because you'd think that would be like an aerodynamic problem versus some smoother bodywork.
Well, it would be if most of it wasn't blocked off and there was no actual airflow through there.
Yeah,
so I mean, most of what's there is there purely for aesthetic reasons, for good or ill.
Yeah, it's the unaesthetic aesthetics for sure. So, what did you think of the controls inside? Because it's got this it has that screen up high, but it's not as tacked on as we've seen in other cars. It's this other element where the HVAC controls are there too. So it's almost it's integrated a little bit better in some ways. And it looks like it's got physical controls for the HVAC underneath. What did you think of all the control schemes? Because that's one of the things that I still have some trouble with in some Toyotas is like, it's not quite as clear as like we were just talking about like Kia or Hyundai. The controls in this look like they're pretty good, but I'm sure there's some good, some bad.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of buttons there. And they're, you do have, rotary control knobs for volume and tuning for the audio. There's a row of buttons across the bottom there, just above the shifter, for the various climate stuff, your defoggers and seat heaters and things like that are, kind of undistinguished from each other. So you do have to kind of look at it to figure out which one it is you want. But, aside from that, it basically, it works pretty well. I didn't have any major complaints about it. A lot of the stuff the most important stuff is, right on the steering wheel stocks, your cruise control and your audio controls are right there on the steering wheel spokes. I mean, they're all right there. It was definitely nice to have, heated seats and heated steering wheel, when we had some cold weather, last week. So, I can't really complain too much about it. I think there's a little storage area just below the center stack ahead of the shifter that's a little awkward to get stuff in and out of. I mean, it's good, in theory, it's a good place to stick your phone. But it doesn't, the kind of the openings on the side and to the right of the shift lever are kind of a little bit awkwardly placed. And the way the cup holder is, you've got two cup holders immediately to the right of the shift lever. Yeah. And so if you have a big coffee cup in those cup holders, kind of access to that storage area, becomes even more, awkward. Let's just leave it at that. So yeah, it's, aside, but I mean, those are the kinds of things that, if you have to live with the car, they might get annoying after a while. There is a large center console bin, under the armrest. So there's plenty of storage space there. So I guess most likely if I was driving this car on a daily basis for years on end, I probably wouldn't use that storage area in the front underneath the center stack very much, just because it's not very well placed to get stuff in and out of. But everything else about it generally works fine. Yeah, well, and I wonder if it's there as a storage unit, like storage area, but it's also there to look open and make it feel less. Yeah, I think it's more for that than anything else. This is a trend we've seen in recent years. Usually, very often, what you'll find as manufacturers have gone away from mechanical shift levers for the transmission, which this still has. It still has a mechanical shifter. As they've moved toward, at least on the non-hybrid versions, as they've moved towards electronic shifters, whether it's rotary shift knobs or push buttons, what they've tended to do is that console has had more of an upward sweep there, and you actually have that storage area underneath that's accessible only from the sides, from either the driver or passenger side. And that can actually works out fairly well. Like if you're going to store a purse or a small bag under there, you can usually stick that under there. That works fine. One thing that, that the Avalon doesn't have in that storage area in the front, there's no USB ports up there. And the one I had didn't even have a wireless charging pad for a phone. If you've got a phone that supports Qi wireless charging. The Avalon was, I think, like the first Toyota to offer that too. So I'm surprised it doesn't have it. The one I had didn't have it. I'm not sure if it's a standalone option on other trim levels. The one I had was a touring, and that it didn't have that feature there. It isn't touring like, maybe it's not the top trim, but the limited is the top trim level. Yeah, that seems like a feature. Everybody has their device. You should figure out how to make it easy to charge. Yeah. I like the cars now that have some of them have a white outline, or just they'll tell you what the high current. Yeah, it's usually the USB ports are actually in the center console, like the bin that's underneath the armrest. Yeah, and that's so I think what they're always trying handy. I think what they're trying to encourage there is, plug your phone in and stick it in there, so it's you don't want it to be handy. I have resisted every opportunity for other people to encourage me to do the right thing throughout my entire life. A damn car is not going to do it now. I generally stash the phone in the cup holder, and I find that if there's USB ports in the console, it underneath there, like in front of the shifter, that to me seems better than having to open the armrest and then run the wire and have it futz around the cable. Maybe that's just me. Yeah, usually, if there's USB ports, right at the front of the console there, in that space ahead of the shifter, I'll usually have a short USB cable. When I get in the car, I'll just plug it in there. So it's not really, amenable to picking up the phone that way. So it's charging and it's connected. And, if I'm using Android Auto, it's working that way. And that way the cable's not dangling around either. In this particular one, because the USB ports are inside that bin under the armrest, I had the cable running out of there, and as you said, the phone sitting in the cup holder instead. Yeah.
Well, that's as we continue to carry these devices with us, and they, fashion now as they continue to get larger too. So automakers are having to contend with that, and we'll see their different solutions for it. I guess the last thing I'm curious about is that, again, that bin up in front there, it looks like there's a very thick plastic bezel around the whole thing. What are the materials like? Is that going to just look crappy, or does it look cheap?
No, the materials are good. It looks like it's a very high quality plastic there. So you're talking about the storage area ahead of the shifter? Yeah,
there's just you see how it comes. Basically, it's the trim that actually comes down and is the surround all the way back to the armrest, right? It goes around the shifter and everything.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a high quality matte plastic material. It doesn't look cheap. And it's not the kind of overly glossy thing that I think won't necessarily age well. I think it'll be fine. 5 or 10 years, of use. I think it'll probably look fine. It'll be easy to clean, but still look, I think it fits in with the rest of the interior, with the leathers and the wood trim that's in there as well.
Yeah, because that has been a challenge in Toyota's more so a few years ago. But there was 1 or 2 generations of the Camry where you just got in here like, what happened?
Yeah, yeah. No, it doesn't look like it's been cost reduced. It looks like they've picked a material that should hold up well. That doesn't look cheap now and should hold up well over the life of the car.
And also in Toyota's defense, it looks like if you have wireless charging, the phone will tuck in front of the shifter. That's where the wireless charging pad goes, I guess.
Right. The one I had didn't seem to have that there.
Okay. So I guess the key is just buy the wireless charger.
Yeah.
And all of our complaints go away. All right. Well, I had a good opportunity to sample what you can get for $50,000. There's a very interesting couple of weeks. A couple of weeks ago, they dropped off a 2019 Dodge Challenger RT with the Scat Pack and the wide body appearance kit and ZR rated tires.
Got kind of the Demon look without the Demon engine.
Yeah, but it still has the big Hemi. It had the 6.4 liter, which is 485 horsepower, 485 pound-feet of torque. That's a lot.
So it's basically like driving a Hellcat with the black key instead of the red key. Yeah,
it's plenty of power, and it's gorgeous. It was a gorgeous green. I really, really like the Challenger. It's a stylish car still. It's definitely distinctive, and it says something about the driver, whether or not you agree with that statement. It makes it. It sounds fantastic. It just has that V8 bark and rumble. So
are you saying that this is the kind of car that might hint that the owner or driver is a middle-aged guy with a decent income and some insecurities about his masculinity?
Either, that, or one of my coworkers saw me pull in with it in the morning. He was like, well, that's a car for a guy who pulls out. I was just like, Jesus.
Okay.
I suppose it seems more like a car for a grandpa. Because those are the guys that remember
the original Challengers.
Right, cars like that. And really, it's a fantastic car. I love the Challenger. I don't care how old it is. The biggest issue I had with it was...
And amazingly, it's actually gotten better with age.
Oh, they're at this point now where all the development has long been paid off for that car. So it's just like, well, okay, what can we do with it? And they keep making it, different versions. And that's really the only thing that's going to sell Challengers now is like, well, this year it has the new color, right? And it's been around for what? Since 2000, when did the first one come out? 10? 9?
Maybe it was 7. I think it was 2007 or 8. It was before. It was just before the recession.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been around for a long time. And there's nothing wrong with it, though. It drives really well. I love the close coupled feel of it. But the Scat Pack and the way this car was configured is really quite a commitment. This is not an everyday car. You can use it that way, but it's really designed like this is the car that you drive to the track on the nights you can go drag racing, and you drag race with it. It can do it's set up with, it had ZR tires on it, and the suspension was set up for, basically it handled pretty well, except for the temperatures were low. So ZR rated tires under 40 degrees, not a good combination. Yeah, no, they get really, really greasy. They just don't have any traction. But you can take this car and go to your motorsports thing and come back with it. And it had a rear seat delete, so I couldn't take anybody in it. But I'm enthusiastic that Chrysler offers this. Because it really it is a particular car for a particular buyer, and it's great that it exists. And I like the close coupled Challenger cockpit. It's a good GT. This is not a GT kind of Challenger. Leave the Scat Pack and the wide body kit off, or get the Challenger GT itself. That's a better sort of Grand Tourer. This car is a lot more purposeful. But it's fantastic, and it's so much performance for $50,000. I was astounded when I priced it out. I was like, that's got to be a mistake. It can't be that cheap. Because it's quick, and it's got big brakes.
Remember when $50,000 seemed like a lot of money? Yeah.
I mean, we were just talking about starter cars that were $25,000, right? Yeah. It snowed while I had it, and so I left it parked. So I spent a bunch of time actually reviewing the 2006 Hyundai Sonata. Because I borrowed that from my mother-in-law, because the Crown Victoria, last couple times I drove that, getting a grinding out of the rear brakes when I use them. So that says to me that it's pads and rotor time.
Yep.
And I didn't want to push my luck, because I've probably done about 120 miles on it doing that. It's like, I should not do that anymore. So now I have boxes of pads and rotors sitting down in the living room, ready to swap on. I just have to find the time to do it now. But yeah, I thought the fleet guy was actually going to get stuck with it, because there was still some snow and ice, and it's just like, man, this car, it's a handful in a good way when it's dry and the temperatures are good. It's a car that commands some respect, and that I find that very entertaining. We've talked about that. I like cars that are a little bit evil, but it felt to me like I should not be out in these conditions with this car. This is just straight up irresponsible of me. And so I parked it as much as I could while the weather was actually bad. So you just have to bear that in mind. I think it would have been a lot more docile on winter tires, but even so, it's got a lot of power, and there's no winter mode in the transmission. But I'm very pleased that I got to spend time with it, because I just every time I drive a Challenger, I really enjoy it, because it's just that kind of car,
Yeah, no, I hear you. I agree. And for what it's worth, the modern Challenger came out in 2008 as a 2009 model.
Wow, 10 years already.
Yeah.
And they've restyled it. They what was it, 2015?
Yeah, I mean, they've tweaked it a few times over the years. They redid the taillights. They updated the grille a bit. The V8 versions have, the inboard headlamps, are now, have open centers, for air intakes there, to feed the big Hemis. I don't know if the one you had, or at least on the higher power ones, certainly on all the Hellcats they do. I think on the SRTs, all the 6.4 liter Hemi versions, I think have that as well.
Yeah, this one wasn't quite an SRT, so I think it just had regular looking lights. I mean, it looks fantastic. I really liked coming home to it, like sitting in the driveway. I was like, that is a good looking car. And it's the Challenger thing.
It's a design that is held up remarkably well. It has aged very well. When it came out, it was clearly, a throwback to the original, 1970 Challenger in a lot of ways, but it wasn't so retro that it looks out of place then, or now 10 years later.
Yeah, I really, this is a car that has a lot of charm, and all of the things that are good about it are still good about it. The seats are comfortable. The controls are fairly easy to use. It's easy to drive. Visibility is a little bit low. You're going to get that. I mean, it's still better than a Camaro.
Right.
Yeah. It has a decent trunk. It has
of course, sitting in a refrigerator box has better visibility than a Camaro, but
right. Yeah. You can see out of the handles on the side. When you don't pay $1 to get rid of the rear seat, you can hold, humans in it. So, the Challenger continues to be charming. I do wish they made a version of the GT with the V8. That would be, I think, my favorite configuration, but they don't make decisions based on what I like. So that's fine. And then this week, I'm still driving the 2019 Volvo S60. So the first... Now
that's one I'm interested to hear your opinions on.
Yeah.
That's quite new.
So first of all, actually, when we talked about the XC40 a couple weeks ago now, I got curious enough to actually call our friend at Volvo, and he answered some questions for me. And so, yes, Sensus feels snappier because they have increased the processor speed across all models. So we were correct. Yay for us.
So we weren't just imagining it.
No,
it wasn't just a case of Stockholm syndrome with the infotainment system.
Very nice, nicely done.
Even though Volvo is on the other side of the country, but yeah.
No, that's right. They're in Gothenburg. Yeah. Whatever. It's Sweden. Yeah. It's not that big of a country. It's like the size of Virginia or something.
Actually, you'd be surprised how big it is.
It goes all the way up to the Arctic Circle.
Yeah,
too.
I mean it's actually pretty large.
The inhabited part isn't maybe.
That's true. Yes, the part that has most of the human population is relatively small.
Yeah,
there's plenty of reindeer in the north though.
That's that. Yeah, and cold weather testing.
Yeah.
So yes, the processor has been updated for better response, and so that's noticeable, and it's noticeable here in the S60 as well. The other thing he told me, which made me laugh, was that most of the complaints about the ergonomics and Sensus he gets from journalists. The people who buy the cars don't complain about it because they get used to it. And I was like, okay, that's fair. And so, I wanted to make sure.
For those of us that only drive them for a week at a time, once every few months or every 6 months or so, we're the ones that whine about it.
Right. And I think that's a valid thing to consider. Is some of the stuff that we complain about is because we've got to very, very quickly familiarize ourselves with the controls in a car and then evaluate whether they're better or worse during that short period than the car we just came out of, which is going to be the first thing we remember, and then other cars that we like that have left an impression. So
what you're saying is that the customers are suffering from Stockholm syndrome.
I think the customers acclimate over a period of time, which it sounds like Stockholm syndrome, right? But and I have found that over the last 2 Volvo loans, like having more time with Sensus, it does. You do get a little bit more used to it. It's still not my favorite, but I think me personally, with my aversion to automatic stuff, if I let that go and let the car do the thing that the car was designed for, because Europeans really love automatic stuff. They're like, set it and forget it. They like that. I am a control freak, so I don't. But if I let it do that, if I set it at 68 degrees and just say, do your thing, it's a lot more enjoyable. And so anyway,
just out of curiosity, earlier this week, Volvo released a preview of the new HMI for the Polestar 2, which is going to be their first battery electric car that's coming out next year.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
And it's also their first model that's going to have their new infotainment system that is actually built on Android Automotive. And they've actually significantly revised the user interface. And you can find it and download it on an app or on a smartphone as a progressive web app. So it's not a native app, but you can kind of play around in there and see what the interface is going to look like. Have you had a chance to look at it yet?
I haven't. No.
Okay. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but it's worth taking a look at. You can get an idea of what the UI is going to look like. It's actually quite significantly different from Sensus today. I mean, when they first announced it last year, they indicated that it was basically going to be the Sensus interface, but with new underpinnings on it. But it's actually changed pretty substantially. And I don't know if this version is just going to be for the Polestar models, and maybe the Volvo branded cars will retain the existing Sensus style interface with the 3 pages where you swipe left to right. Because this one is actually, rather than swiping left to right, you actually sweep down from the top and up from the bottom to get different pages. And I'll include the link in the show notes, and maybe between now and next week, Dan, you can have a chance to try it out, and we can talk about it further. Yeah,
I'm actually looking at it right now, just in a post on Popular Mechanics, and it looks like it has evolved some of the controls. It does look like there's different organization. So yeah, I'll play with it. I'll see what I can discern. That's the tricky part for an automaker. I mean, you spent time at automakers, so these things are developed years out, and they have to last for years as well. So that's really tough for them. And while they're at it, they've got to learn.
Fortunately, we're getting into an era now, where you can do over-the-air updates, and they've actually been doing, most automakers have been actually doing over-the-air updates for their telematics and infotainment systems now for quite some time. They just haven't, unlike Tesla, they haven't been doing it for safety critical systems, or at least for control systems, vehicle control systems. They've been doing it for the infotainment and telematics for quite a while. This is something that actually can evolve, and as Tesla has shown, you can change the interface pretty dramatically over time with those sorts of updates. So whatever you build in, at the start is not necessarily what needs to be there at the car's end of life or throughout its life cycle.
Right. It's kind of dependent on what the hardware will run too. So you've got a lot of choices to make, from just the actual hardware that it's running to the actual layout of the interface. And then, so if you're going to do a wholesale update of that system, right, it'll run on every single version of that model ever built. But if it's a very different change, now you've got all of those existing users. Are you going to alienate them? Are you going to wind up with them complaining at you or like?
Well, and that's one of the issues that Tesla has had, as they have made changes. In some cases, customers have complained quite loudly about those changes.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's not a trivial thing to back rev. I'm sure they won't let you do that.
And they don't usually don't even give you the option of rejecting, previewing and then rejecting an update. Once they push out an update, you're basically stuck with it.
Yeah, seems like another reason to just stick with an old analog car. But this is the first U.S. built Volvo, the S60, and it's fantastic. I honestly,
you were driving a car. That's right.
Yeah, I was
not just an infotainment system.
I was shocked by how good this car is. Not because Volvos aren't good and nice, but it's the first one dynamically. That over the last, 3 or 4 years, they've all been pretty decent, but this is the first one that really brings it all together, and it has sort of silky moves about it. It just dynamically transitions very nicely, like when you're doing S curves or something. It has a nice sort of supple ride to it. It handles well. This is a T6, so it's powerful enough. It could always use a little bit more power, and there's going to be a T8 version that will give you that. But this is just a very good car. I'm very impressed with it. I love the way it looks. I especially love the interior style. I think they've hit on an identity. I hope it's not too late. But they've hit on an identity both inside and out that updates Volvo past the last time they really updated their look back in, the late 90s, early 2000s when I think it was Peter Horbury, right? When they did the first S80 and then all the P2 cars and everything. Everything had that sort of round-shouldered Volvo family identity. And then in between, it evolved a bit, and now they've done a change where it started with that new XC90. And now it's sort of proliferated across the lineup, and I think everything looks really good. And I'm just impressed with the car. I think it's a little bit longer than the old S60, even the long wheelbase version. So it's roomy. I think it's about 3 Series size, maybe a little smaller. To me, that's a great size. I was like, this again, like the XC40. This is a Volvo that could bring me back to Volvo as a past Volvo owner. So. I can't think of a better endorsement than that. I can't swing $55,000 for what this one costs, but that's not outrageous.
Give it a couple of years, get a used one.
Yeah. Hopefully their resale value doesn't drop like a stone like it used to. When by the time I got done with my S60s, they were like, no, that car's not worth anything. But yeah, it's a good car. It's very competitive, and unfortunately, cars are not selling, which is too bad because it's a great sedan. I like the trunk size. I took it to the mountain skiing with my my 10-year-old, which is not something I did with the Challenger. This heated steering wheel gets nice and hot. It's very good.
I do like heated steering wheels this time of year.
Yeah, and honestly, just all of the things that I liked about Volvo classically have been smartly updated. It doesn't even have the scoliosis thing that some of the head restraints do in other models. It's probably my favorite Volvo, and I'm impressed with the build quality. I think their new plant is putting out good stuff.
Well, that sounds like a good start for the plant in South Carolina. Hopefully, hopefully their plans there don't get too upset by all the stuff that's going on with the trade issues between the U.S. and various other countries now, because part of the rationale for building that plant was to actually export a lot of the production from there, because I think the South Carolina plant was supposed to be one of the primary production sites for the S60, and without if it costs them more money to export those, or even for importing some of the parts, it could hit their bottom line and make that plant non-viable for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. So in that plant, I haven't really looked at what is actually there. Is it just an assembly plant, or is it, are they stamping, and is it sort of like raw materials go in one side and cars go out the other?
Yeah, I believe they have a body shop. They're doing stamping and welding, painting, all that. I don't think they're producing engines. So they're bringing in engines, powertrains from overseas, from Sweden, and perhaps from China as well, because Volvo also has production in China. But I think the body shop, paint shop, all that stuff is being done locally.
Yeah. So I guess what's really going to be the determiner is what the raw materials cost, right? For getting sheet steel or sheet aluminum or whatever in there. Yeah,
well, I mean, there's a 25% tariff on the steel now. I think 10% on aluminum. So that, and that the thing is, that's causing grief for everybody in the industry right now.
Yeah. Well, I hope they work it out. It's a very good car, and hopefully too, if they need to shift for the workforce down there, because it's an SPA platform vehicle, they can shift another SPA car in there that makes better profit, more revenue, so that the plant isn't in the red. It continues.
Yeah, I would guess, that they will probably add production of the XC60 there, because that's probably going to be their highest volume model in North America, going forward for the next several years, is the XC60. And maybe we'll even get the V60 here. Who knows? I
would love that. God, that would have me looking for loans. I can't give a more full-throated endorsement. I really, it's certainly, if I were to drive it back to back with a 3 Series or an A4 or something, there would be differences, notable differences between the three cars. But that's not terrible. That they're each sort of have an identity. And I like the way this one has come together.
Well, that's good to hear. I like the progress that Volvo's been making over the last several years. One question about it, the shifter. Does it have the same shifter as the XC40?
Okay, no, it doesn't. But that's actually something that Russell and I talked about as well. And my suspicion last week was that double tap thing that was sort of brought to the XC40 from the I think it came initially from the XC90 hybrid.
Yeah.
So this actually, I believe, has a mechanical shifter in the S60. So there's a button in front, you pull, it's a just normal shift quadrant. The XC40 has an electronic shifter. So they lifted that. And the electronic shift logic in the Volvo does require the double tap. And he said, yeah, it takes a couple days to get used to it, which I found. But then I also found myself double tapping the shifter in the Challenger after I got out of the XC40. And their logic behind it is, look, if that gets bumped, it's not a physical, it's not a mechanical connection. So if it gets bumped, the safest thing for it to do is go to neutral. And then you can correct your mistake and put it back in gear or select the other gear that you want. And yes, going from car to car, it becomes a little bit of a learning curve. But after a little bit of time, it's a sort of a second nature. And I can't really argue with that because that's what happened to me. Although over the first couple of days, it does get slightly annoying.
Yeah. And, as you said, we're in kind of a unique position because we keep jumping from one car to another, all with different interfaces. And, we never really get a chance to get accustomed to any of them.
Yeah. I will, Casey's going to listen to this. Maybe he doesn't listen. I don't know. But he's going to hear me not crap all over Census. And he's going to be like, what is with the endless grief that I gave him? So I'm sorry.
Okay. Let's move on.
All right.
So it's been about a week since the Detroit Auto Show press previews, of which there wasn't actually a whole lot to preview this year, because like a lot of auto shows, there were a bunch of automakers that decided that they didn't really need to be here. Increasingly manufacturers are deciding that, they're better off doing their own standalone vehicle reveal events away from shows. And even here in Detroit, we had a couple that were kind of like that, because then they can get all of the press attention to themselves and they're not scrambling, for 20 minutes of attention during the course of a busy media day at an auto show. So we didn't have any of the European premium brands here this year, unfortunately. So no Volvo, no Mercedes-Benz, no BMW, no Audi, no Jaguar Land Rover, no Porsche. The only premium brand here was actually Volkswagen.
So do you think that that's a mistake for them, or do you think that for those European brands, we go to Frankfurt or Geneva or wherever the European shows happen, like they get coverage. So,
well, even at those shows, I mean, in 2018, at the Paris and Geneva shows last year, there were a bunch of European OEMs that didn't attend those shows either. Like Volvo did not go to Paris, I think. And they didn't do Geneva either. Volkswagen, I think skipped the Paris show this year or last year. There's a bunch of automakers that are, so this is actually a problem that's kind of endemic to trade shows in general. Even at CES, there were fewer companies involved this year than there have been in the past, or less of a presence than there have been in the past. In other industries, trade shows have been struggling. Because of the high cost of paying for a booth and constructing the booth, especially at auto shows. Manufacturers have been looking for how they can cut down on their construction costs for the booths. Hopefully next year, when the Detroit Auto Show moves from January to June, that will be alleviated somewhat because they won't be paying huge overtime fees to the crews putting together the booths during the Christmas holidays. And so hopefully some of the manufacturers will come back. That remains to be seen. None of them have officially committed. They all said that they're, those that skipped the show this year are watching, and, they'll make a decision, one way or the other soon, but nothing yet.
Yeah. I was listening to Autoline, and they were saying it felt, they had Joanne Muller and, I think Todd Lassa and Frank Marcus on, maybe. They said that it felt a little sad this year, kind of dark, and maybe not dark like 2008, but just like empty.
Yeah, it was more empty. It was, some of us, we were talking about it, it felt, in some ways it felt quiet, like the 2009 show did, right after the financial meltdown. But at least, that year in 2009, to cut costs down, they compressed everything into one day, so everybody showed up. It's just the media previews, the press conferences started at 6:30 in the morning with Porsche, and then ran until about 6:30 that night. But everybody was here. The feeling was kind of somber that year because of what was going on around us, but it was, at least everyone showed up. This year, half the industry just didn't show up. And so, we started at, I think the first press conference started at 8:30, and by 2:30 in the afternoon, we were all done. So it was quiet, but in a very different kind of way than the 2009 show. Yeah. And hopefully that doesn't, in some way, in a lot of respects, it's similar to what we've seen for quite a few years now in Chicago. The Chicago show is very much like that. There's relatively little news that comes out of the Chicago show, and the big thing for these auto shows, especially in North America, is they're put on by local dealer organizations, so the Detroit Auto Dealers Association here, whatever, the Chicago auto dealers, put on their show, same thing in LA and elsewhere. And, they're primarily not intended to be media events. They are media events, but they've always existed primarily as a means for local auto dealers to give customers a place to come in and cross shop and look at everything that's in the marketplace, and to generate leads. And then, after the show, the salespeople will, reach out and contact, the people that were interested in the cars and, hopefully make some sales. And part of the problem, in Detroit is, especially for the European premium brands, is Detroit is just not a huge, the Detroit region is not a huge sales market for brands like Audi and Mercedes-Benz and BMW. They sell cars here, but, not enormous numbers of them compared to, say New York or Los Angeles or Miami. And so, the manufacturers just felt that it wasn't worth their investment this year to set up a huge booth and do all that work. So after the press previews are done, and some of the floor space, some of the local dealers do bring in, their own cars from their inventory, and put those on display, but you don't have the big fancy stands that we've traditionally had at this auto show.
Yeah. You kind of can't argue with that. That was something I was going to say as well, as, who are the shows for? And while they have been used, for media days to have some kind of press release bonanza and make some news, that has increasingly shifted where there's like endless leaks and stuff just being put out online, or like you said, where they will hold an event on their own.
Yeah, they'll
really
do standalone events. For several years now, BMW has actually been, doing a lot of their reveals, a month or two ahead of a major auto show, and Mercedes has started doing it, and other companies, they'll do it at standalone events where they'll show, they'll reveal all the information about the new product, and then, they'll bring it to the auto show, and it'd be the first time the public gets to see it in person. But all of the, most of the information will already be out there by the time they get to an auto show. Yeah.
So it's of limited use for making any kind of press coverage happen. And, so that the shows are, the shows are for the customers in that region. And we've gotten these shows like Detroit, like Chicago, like LA, New York, they've kind of grown to these outsized events. And now I think we're just seeing that that's not where the automakers feel like their money is best spent, and so they're shrinking again, and they're shrinking globally too, like you talked about. So, we'll see more of those standalone events, or just stuff that just like, here it is, we're just going to release it on the internet.
Even here in Detroit, on the Wednesday before the auto show press previews, Ford did an event at Ford Field to show off the Explorer. And I mean, that one was they invited media to it, but that one was as much an event for their employees as anybody else. I mean, most of the people in attendance there were Ford employees. And they had the media that wasn't at CES did attend that, but we had actually already seen it in a backgrounder the week before, so we already had all the information. So a lot of media didn't even bother going to that one. But then on the Sunday night before the show, Cadillac did their event where they showed off the new XT6, at one of the local theaters in Detroit. And that's the kind of thing we've increasingly been seeing in recent years is do something before the show so you get 100% of the news cycle to yourself before the show even opens.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's talk about some of the stuff that was actually at the show. You mentioned the XT6 that showed up.
Indeed, it did.
The reaction I surmise was actually less than positive. I mean, people kind of shrugged about it.
Yeah, Cadillac is kind of late to this segment. They're the last of the major premium brands to introduce a 3-row crossover. You've got vehicles like the Audi Q7 and the Mercedes GLS, and BMW's got 3-row versions of the X5, and they've now they've got the new X7, the Volvo XC90. They've all been out there for a while now, and Lincoln and Cadillac were kind of the last two. Lincoln showed the Aviator at the LA Auto Show, and the XT6 debuted here in Detroit, and pretty much everybody was kind of underwhelmed by it. I mean, the design is fine. It's inoffensive, but not particularly exciting either, especially compared to the Aviator. Yeah. It's based on the Lambda platform, which is also used for the Buick Enclave and the Chevy Traverse and the GMC Acadia. The interior, did not seem to be, particularly premium. I mean, it just did not seem to be up to snuff. The only powertrain available right now is the 3.6 liter V6 with a 9-speed automatic and either front or all-wheel drive. It does have GM's twin clutch all-wheel drive system, that can vector the torque to the front or rear. And that system works well. But they talked about this being an important vehicle for Cadillac, both here in North America, but also in China. And in China, increasingly, you've got to have some electrification options. You've got to have a plug-in hybrid or a battery electric version, to really be competitive in there, especially in these kind of segments. And GM has nothing for this one.
Have they developed the Lambda at all for that? I mean, regardless of what we've seen here, like, is there anything they could even just...
They all indications from Steve Carlisle and other people from Cadillac. Steve Carlisle's the president of Cadillac, and others I talked to, that there's no plans for this generation of the XT6 to have any electrification options in there, at least not before a mid-cycle refresh, which is several years out. The other thing that it's missing is Super Cruise.
Yeah,
this vehicle is kind of late to the segment, and Cadillac's got what is arguably the best partially automated driving system on the market with Super Cruise, and they didn't put it in this thing.
Well, the whole thing just, it seems like there's 3 glaring errors to me with the XT6. You just identified Super Cruise as probably the biggest, just because they're trying to compete for that premium segment, and those kind of features are really what's driving a lot of interest now. And just Super Cruise is very good. The other is the powertrain, like you said. It's just that 3.6 is like fine. It's a good engine, but you can get it in an Equinox
or a Traverse,
right? And then you have the interior, which in pictures it presents pretty well, and I'm sure the top third of the interior is pretty nice to look at and to touch. But then all of the other stuff, I just see this lots of seams, lots of different black plastics. Probably all feel kind of cheap and crappy in that GM way. You know, it's the same thing that gets the trucks too, where you're just like, this thing costs 70 grand and it's got, you know, plastic you'd see in a freaking Sonic in it. So those seem like three things that just right away, you know, in a brand new model, it's starting from behind the eight ball. They didn't really do enough. It's almost like they half-assed it. And I'm sure there's reasons for it, but those are reasons to either delay it or do it in a different way. Or like, don't forge ahead with the vehicle just so you can tick the boxes off your sort of checklist and say, yep, we came to market. Like that's not a good plan.
Yeah. And, you know, like I said, you know, since this is not exactly, you know, first into the segment by any stretch of the imagination, you know, if you're going to be late, at least make sure that you do everything you can to make it the best. And I think, you know, GM says, you know, that the electrical architecture and the Lambda platform, you know, can't support Super Cruise, and that's perfectly legitimate. But you know, if you're going to take the time to bring this to market, you know, 2.5 years after the Acadia debuted, you know, or 3 years, I think now actually, after the Acadia debuted with the same platform, you know, why didn't you take that time to make those updates, you know, and put that system in there, make it available? You know, we're not going to start seeing additional models with Super Cruise until sometime in 2020.
It just like that boggles my mind. Like, don't bring it to market if you can't put Super Cruise in it.
Yeah. No, I agree, especially if you want to compete with the in the Chinese market. You know, you're going to have some hybrid or plug-in hybrid options, and the Lincoln Aviator, you know, is going to have 30-mile plug-in hybrid range. 450 horsepower, 600 foot-pounds of torque. You know, it's going to be a real performance plug-in hybrid. And, you know, this one has nothing. I mean, you've got, you know, a 300 horsepower naturally aspirated V6 as your only option. Apparently, they will be adding a V8 version to this at some point. But
classic GM. Don't come to market with a piece of crap and then say we're going to make it better later. No.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think, you know, piece of crap might, you know, is kind of overstating it, but just kind of half-assing it.
Yeah, compared to the Aviator. The Aviator is on a brand new platform. It has a pretty exclusive version of at least a high performance engine, right? Mm-hmm. It looks fantastic. It's larger, a little bit bigger, you know.
Only marginally so, not by much. It's pretty close to the same size. It
has that rear wheel drive proportion and dynamics, so I think it's going to drive very well. And it's, you know, its interior is, you know, Lincoln interiors now, at least when you buy the higher trim, like they look like they're worth the money. Like the Aviator was a very important vehicle for Ford, and they put the effort in, and it shows. The XT6 is arguably a very important vehicle for Cadillac, and I'm sure they put some effort into it. I don't want to criticize the people who worked on it. It just seems like it got off track. Like, they did the best they could.
I have a feeling that, you know, over the last several years, you know, with the whole move to New York and then move back to Detroit, you know, a lot of things got off track with Cadillac, because, you know, the other part of all this is on the Friday before the show, you know, or I guess Thursday before the show, you know, they announced that GM had an analyst briefing, a financial analyst briefing, and they said that, you know, Cadillac is going to be their lead brand going forward for electric vehicles, you know, and their first model, you know, coming to market, you know, is an all new electric crossover, battery electric crossover, will be coming after their current 3-year product cycle is done. You know, starting with the XT4 last fall and now the XT6, they're launching a new vehicle every 6 months for 3 years. And after that's done, which means that, you know, 2021, and they showed a preview of what this thing's going to look like, as, you know, drawings of what this thing's going to look like. It looks good, but, you know, we're not going to see it till 2021 at least.
The XT6 looks good too, but it's also it's a 3-row version. It's not that much bigger than the XT5. You know, like it's longer, but what's the rear seat access like in this? Like, why is it? I have so many questions, and so like, why does it not have that what the hell is it? There's a turbo V8, right? That's in the XTS.
No, it's in the CT6.
Oh, CT6. Why did I think you could get the XTS V Sport? Maybe I'm thinking of the CT6 V Sport. Yeah, which doesn't exist in a front wheel drive transverse configuration. So
yeah, you wouldn't be able to put that twin turbo V8 into the XT6.
I bet you could put the CT6 V Sport engine in there though, right? Maybe, I don't know.
No,
I mean,
no, it's that's too much power. It's going to be too big to put into the Lambda platform. That's not going to fit in there.
That's just a shame.
Yeah.
So
you could do the twin turbo V6.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But not the V8 that's going to the CT6V.
Right. I'm sorry. So I wish it had that, because that's certainly Cadillac distinctive. But you've got the XTS V Sport that has the turbo 3.6.
Yeah.
The Lambda is not the same as Epsilon, which I think that's based on. But they're both front wheel drive. You can make it work. Be ambitious. This doesn't seem like an ambitious product to me.
No, it doesn't. They did not. It doesn't seem like they tried to stretch at all. To make this something really special. It's kind of okay. Let's get a 3-row crossover out there. And they did kind of the bare minimum to do that.
Yeah. That's too bad.
That's unfortunate, for Cadillac, because Cadillac has so much potential, and they've done some great stuff over the last decade, and this is not one of them.
No, and I'm sure the liveries are going to love it, because it's going to be cheaper to run, I think, than the Escalade. But it's not going to be cheap, and there's a lot of competition for your dollar at this level, and so. I don't know. I feel like it's a miss, and that's too bad, especially since there was a lot of anticipation for it. Yeah.
Speaking of the Aviator, its platform mate, mentioned, that Ford revealed the Explorer, the weekend or the week before the auto show. They didn't reveal a whole lot of details at that time, but at the auto show, we did see more information on the hybrid and the ST, which are joining the lineup this year. The ST, as with the Edge ST, it's performance version of it. It's got the same 3-liter twin turbo V6 that's in the Aviator as the standard engine in the Aviator, so 400 horsepower in there, which will be nice. And then the hybrid. Unlike the Aviator, which gets a plug-in hybrid, the Explorer is getting just a hybrid variant, or standard hybrid variant, for now at least. At some point, it may get a plug-in or maybe even a battery electric version, but for now, it's just a standard hybrid. And they're using a naturally aspirated 3.3-liter V6 paired up with the hybrid, and I think it's about 318 horsepower and 350 or 360 foot-pounds of torque. So it should do pretty well. They production vehicles will start in May. It goes on sale this summer. They haven't released anything about the fuel economy yet or the performance of this thing, but it will have. They said the police Interceptor hybrid version of this will have at least 24 miles per gallon combined, and I'm guessing that in the civilian version it's probably going to be somewhere around 26, which for an Explorer is pretty good. Yeah, especially for this version of it and with that kind of power, Yeah, and from a design perspective, it's not a radical change. It's clearly, an incremental design change, but I mean, mechanically it's all new. It's on a completely new platform. So it ditches the old Volvo P2 platform. You're still going to immediately recognize it as an Explorer, but it's been updated, instead of the horizontal lines, being parallel to the ground. It's got a little bit more of an upward sweep towards the back.
Yeah.
It looks a little bit sleeker than before, a little bit faster, and the proportions are better now because it's got the longitudinal powertrain, and rear drive chassis. So, I think it's a good looking vehicle. And again, even Ford though, they're putting their Copilot 360 system as standard on the Explorer, which means you get things like blind spot information and lane keeping and forward collision alert and automatic emergency braking is standard. But that's a camera based system. If you want adaptive cruise control and the lane centering, you've got to pay extra for that, to add the radar sensor and, get that upgrade. And, increasingly in that same segment, with vehicles like the new Hyundai Sonata or Hyundai Santa Fe that I've actually got in the driveway right now, things like that are becoming standard equipment, and, I think Ford is going to have to, kind of rethink some of their packaging there as well, just like Cadillac is with making some more of that stuff standard equipment.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's a little bit more acceptable to me that you have to buy it extra on a Ford versus a Cadillac. That, the Cadillac's going to be $70,000. It should have it. But if the Ford's competitors, like the Santa Fe, they're figuring out how to package it so that it's standard equipment, that's something that, that's a sales point, and so that's something that they're going to have to figure out. And I think part of the difference is okay, fine, you can get radar cruise. We have a 400 horsepower V6.
Yeah, that's true. That's something the Santa Fe does not offer. You don't have a twin turbo V6 available in there,
and it depends on what's important to you. I think that the Explorer is. It's just really well done. I'm very impressed with it. And I know that this is the sort of unibody rear wheel drive platform. This is going to be our next Mustang, right? Like Ford has put a lot of chips into the, push them onto the table with this platform. It's the Aviator, it's the Explorer. It's going to be sort of,
and we'll see more stuff off this platform as well going forward.
And that's the only way to do it going forward for automakers these days, is to just maximize the amount of models and the sort of differentiation you can out of each platform, because they're so expensive to design and build. And Ford is to the point too where they're like, we're going to partner with Volkswagen too.
I mean, Ford's going to have a busy year this year. They've got a bunch of new products coming this year. In addition to the Explorer, we're going to see a new Escape before the end of the year. We're probably going to see the Bronco at least revealed before the end of this year. It won't go on sale till next year, but we'll probably see it revealed this year. The Explorer and the Aviator, and there's one or two other new utilities that we'll probably see sometime this year. So there's going to be a lot of stuff coming. We may even see. Actually, we probably won't see the new F-150 till beginning of next year. Although, since the auto show is not going to be till June next year, we may see it sooner than that. So who knows? But that's going to be a significant update to the F-150 as well. So there's a lot of stuff coming from Ford, and also their new battery electric crossover is going to be shown sometime this year as well.
Right. And what's crazy to me is that the F-150 is now old. It was just redone, but everybody else has redone their trucks in the interim. Did you have a chance to get inside the Explorer at all during the show? Because one of the things to me that I was really disappointed by was the old Explorer was just so claustrophobic, and it felt like you were sitting in a bucket, especially on the passenger side. It seems like with this platform that's designed to be this big, because the impression I got was like they stretched out that P2 platform as much as they possibly could. And there were a lot of compromises made to get it that large. I'm assuming this feels more spacious, more space efficient.
It's definitely more space efficient. The pillars are thinner. They've taken advantage of, new materials, new manufacturing processes, with more high strength steel in there. more aluminum. So things like the pillars are significantly slimmer now, so you have much better visibility out of it. It's actually almost exactly the same size. It's within an inch overall length, and it's the same width and same height. So it's virtually the same size as the existing Explorer.
It's so interesting because
it feels roomier inside.
Yeah, and it looks big. They've pushed the front axle forward because they can do that. And
the wheelbase is several inches longer, but the overall length is the same.
That's impressive. The proportions, it's just like small tweaks. It's like a design school study.
Well, that's the funny thing. I'll get into it more next time when we talk about the Honda Passport. But the Passport is based on the same platform as the Pilot, and it's got the same wheelbase as the Pilot, but the body is 6 inches shorter overall, and it's amazing what a difference that 6 inches makes in its visual proportions. The way
I'm
it
sure
looks.
In person it's even more impressive. In pictures, it's definitely the Passport. It looks tidier.
Yeah.
All right.
What else did we have? The Supra. We finally saw the Supra without camo.
We'd seen that thing without camo for months.
Well, Akio Toyota, on stage during the presentation, talked about, he joked about this being, one of the longest running introductions of a new car ever. They did some preview drives with some of the media last summer. They've shown this thing as a race car, that as a GT race car. They've shown it as a NASCAR stock car, although that thing really has nothing to do with what is a Supra. But I think in person, there's some elements of the Supra that I think maybe a tad overdone. You've got the fake vents on the fender. Arguably the front end, is maybe a little bit overstyled, as is the case with many current generation Toyotas. But overall, I really like the size and the proportions of this thing. It's built on the same platform as the BMW Z4. Uses BMW's twin turbo 3-liter inline six. It's rear wheel drive, automatic transmission only, unfortunately. You look inside, you clearly see a lot of the BMW parts in there, including iDrive.
But that's not terrible. iDrive in a Toyota would be fine. How do you feel
I said the same thing to some of the folks from Toyota. I said, now that you've got iDrive in the Supra, you really need to put it into the rest of your lineup too.
What's your opinion of the Supra being so sort of obviously a BMW? There's been lots of chatter about it, and I feel like it's been dismissed. And to me, it's not a bad thing that it's a Z4. Yeah,
nothing wrong with that. I mean, you've got a front engine, rear wheel drive, 2-seater coupe, a sports car. It's exactly what it should be. And it's, I have no issue with using parts from Toyota to make it, or to use parts from BMW, so that both of these brands can bring out new vehicles like this, to bring out because if both BMW and Toyota had to do everything from scratch on their own for these two vehicles probably would not exist in 2019.
Yeah,
they probably could not justify the engineering expense to do them if they had to develop everything on their own for both of these vehicles. Because for Toyota, there's no more inline sixes in their lineup that they could use for this. That's kind of the classic ideal for the Supra. They always had an inline 6-cylinder engine, and sure you could do it with a V6.
Toyota's V6 is very good. I'm actually thinking, I'd love to see what this car would do with just
right. And it's not like Toyota's V6 doesn't get used in sports cars. I mean, they've been powering the Lotus Evora for many years now. Yeah. So they could certainly put you look at cars like the Lexus RC and others, it's a great engine, but for a Supra they wanted to have an inline 6, because that's what Supras have always had. So to collaborate with BMW on this, I think was great. They're aside from some of the obvious sharing like iDrive, they do look distinct from each other. You're not going to mistake a Supra for a Z4 coupe. It's something quite different.
And that's the other point too, though, right? Like especially the coupe, like that's not going to sell as many as the convertible, I would assume. So the Z4 probably
not necessarily.
I would assume that Z4 coupes sell a lot fewer than convertibles.
Oh, well, there is no Z4 coupe this time.
Last generation, though. Like the last time there was a Z4
there wasn't. Yeah, that was actually the first gen Z4. Yeah. The last generation Z4 had a retractable hardtop, so they didn't do a coupe because it had the retractable hardtop instead. So this time there's just a soft top version.
Right.
No coupe version. And also both the Z4 and the Supra are actually assembled in Austria by Magna Steyr.
Right.
So they're both built on the same assembly line, and they contracted it out to Magna.
That seems like they both got together and like executives like, let's do a car. Okay.
Yeah. we both want to do, new sports cars. What can we do, that we can justify the expense, so we can keep the engineering cost to a minimum, but still do something unique.
And it seems like the engineering, so there's a lot of 3 Series in the Z4. So that, to me, it's just very interesting. It's just, this is basically like a corporate deal. Like, let's take the pieces we've got, change them up a little bit, and release them as a new product. It's almost like when you look at the lineup of like washers and dryers, right? Like the same basic design starts off like at the cheap model and just gets fancier and fancier as you go up the line. I don't know. To me, it looks like a Supra, and I'm sure it drives fantastic. So,
yeah, I mean, from all we've heard from some of the previews, from people like Tim Stevens and others, it was great on the track and great on the road. So we'll see in the next few months. It's going to be going on sale pretty soon. I think in March here in the U.S., late February, early March, it'll be available.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to complain about more 2-door coupes? Which I guess is a little bit redundant, but
not me,
right? Like,
yeah,
this does not seem like a bad thing that they put their heads together and they decided to make these cars, and I'm sure they're distinctive enough too. Fine.
All right. Last one from the auto show is the Shelby GT500. This will be the first time since the 1960s that there's been 2 Shelby Mustangs in production at the same time, because the GT350 will carry on for at least another year or two. And the GT500 is the most powerful street legal Mustang ever built, at least by, from the factory by Ford. They started with the 5.2 liter block from the GT350, beefed that up significantly, added a big honking supercharger that will give it somewhere well in excess of 700 horsepower. We don't know exactly how much yet. And then beefed up everything else to compensate. It's got a big SMC hood with a massive air vent in the hood to get all the air, to vent all the hot air out. Huge air openings in the front. The GT500 is one of those rare instances where there's a massive grille that is actually fully functional. There's almost nothing of it blocked off. In order to get enough cooling air through the engine compartment to manage all the thermal energy that's generated there.
I don't think subtlety is really this car's thing anyway. So
no, no, not at all. But I think, what's really different this time, I remember last time, back when I was still working with Ford Comms team, and we were talking about the GT350, someone who shall remain unnamed, but he knows who he is, referred to, the GT500 customer, as the classic, quarter mile knuckle draggers, which, I think is somewhat unfair.
It's also not if you're from Ford, that's not a thing you say.
Yeah, that's why he shall remain unnamed. But I mean, the last GT500, was, not especially sophisticated. It wasn't a competitor, for high end European sports cars, which is what the GT350 was trying to be more of. So the GT500, really was great, at doing quarter miles. It was fairly heavy, which, especially in the nose, which meant that, it didn't handle as well as some other cars. But this time around, they really wanted to make this an all-around track beast. And so, it's got big honking brakes. It's got the Magna Ride dampers all the way around. It's got they have an optional carbon fiber track pack, which gives you, all of them have a big front splitter, but the carbon fiber track pack gives you that large rear wing, which is adjustable, and also some spats that you can install in the front, behind or in front of the front wheels with dive planes on them, and they're adjustable. So, you can go out, when you go to a track day, you can put those on there and you can adjust them to, change the amount of downforce. You can also adjust the angle of the rear wing, so you can adjust the balance front to rear. This thing's got 5-inch exhaust pipes.
That's like
4 or 5-inch exhaust pipes. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's bonkers. But it should be really, really, really fast.
Yeah, but you can't shift it yourself.
That's true. Well, you can. You just don't have a third pedal to manipulate.
Those are not actually manual transmissions to me.
It's got a new 7-speed dual clutch gearbox, which is not the same one as what's in the Ford GT. This is an all new gearbox that they designed with Tremec, to withstand the torque of this engine, which is going to be impressive.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think that it's a bad thing that it has that one transmission. It just. That's a whole lot of power. I think it's not going to put up the numbers without that transmission either. If it had a conventional manual, its acceleration times would be slower, and so those are bragging rights, I think, in this kind of realm.
It's supposed to do 0 to 60 in about 3.5 seconds and quarter miles in less than 11 seconds. Does it get
to 60 in first gear?
I'm not sure. They didn't say.
I'd be interested to see.
I would guess it probably will.
Because I think that's part of the reason why we've seen 0 to 60 times get so much lower over the last 20 years.
Well, yeah. And, in this case, the top 3 gears are all overdrive gears. So first through fourth are underdrive. So I wouldn't be surprised if it'll hit 60 in first gear. So without a shift.
Right.
And with all the torque this thing's going to have, that should be no problem. One of the most interesting things about this thing, about the GT500, though, I was talking with Carl Widman, who's the chief engineer on Mustang, is he showed me the strut tower brace that they designed for this thing, and because they wanted to keep the hood line low on it, they couldn't do the usual thing of, running the strut tower brace right over the top of the engine, because you've got that big supercharger on the top.
Right.
So what they did was they actually designed a cast magnesium strut tower brace that wraps around behind the top of the engine, ties to the firewall and the strut towers. And it's this pretty intricate casting, and it's really, really lightweight. You can pick it up with just a couple of fingers. I was shocked at how light this thing is.
Oh yeah, I bet it's beautiful too.
Oh yeah, it's gorgeous. And unfortunately, none of the photos that they have, actually show this thing. I'm going to have to see if I can get a photo from them of this strut tower brace, because it's a really impressive little piece of engineering.
So those kind of things are that's the benefit of having an actual automaker make what's essentially a supercar. Because they could do that stuff. It's not a big deal. There's some cost to it, but they have the engineering know-how and manufacturing largesse to be able to be we can do that casting. It'll cost X. We'll make it out of this material. That's not a problem for Ford.
Yeah, and for a low volume model like this, they probably won't do more than a couple of thousand of these a year. If even that many, you can go out to, any number of specialist shops, that will cast those parts for you. You do the engineering, they'll do all the design work and, test it and do all the FME, finite element analysis on this thing, and, have it perfectly engineered, and they'll go out to, some specialist shop and have it cast and machined and, bring them back to the plant and assemble it. And, it's something that would be a lot harder for a startup or, for some really low volume manufacturer to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's other things in this car too. The carbon fiber wheels, the same thing.
Yeah, well, the GT350 was the first production model with available carbon fiber wheels on the GT350R, and those were 19s. For this one, because the front brakes are now 16.5-inch rotors. So just ridiculously massive rotors, but there's a lot of thermal mass there. They went back to their partner in Australia that they developed. I think it's Carbon Technologies. I think is the company that built the wheels for the 350R and also for the GT. To design a new 20-inch carbon fiber wheel for the carbon fiber track pack version, and it's even stronger than before and lighter weight than the 19-inch wheel.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's the problem when you get wheels that big too, is that they're just heavy.
Right. And that's one of the reasons for going to a carbon wheel on something like this, because, 20-inch, 19, 20, 21-inch wheels can get ridiculously heavy, which, has a negative impact on your handling and also on your ride quality.
Yeah. So this will be a fun car to get in the media fleet.
Yeah. And I'm sure you guys will have one in January with ZR rated tires on it.
I'll drive it.
You'll go buy a set of snow tires to put on it just so you can drive it, right?
I would. I really do. I like the challenge of high horsepower cars in winter conditions. There is a level of prudence that's required, though, and that usually means you do need to be able to go, stop, and turn. They need to be on the right tires.
The thing is, with a car like that, even with proper winter tires, the as I found last year when I had the Alpha Giulia Quadrifoglio right after a big snowstorm, is the ground clearance.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's
so.
Super
Even with good winter tires on there, if you've got to plow through the snow with that thing, you're still not going anywhere.
I mean, the air dam with all the little dive planes and stuff looks like it would make a dandy little plow for the driveway apron.
Yeah, I doubt that.
It's not a car for going on unplowed roads at all.
No, definitely not.
It's for all my carping about the transmission. I'm sure it's going to be just a blast to drive, and the people who buy them are probably not going to miss shifting for themselves. And
probably not.
Think about launching a car with that much power and instant torque.
And if you want to shift for yourself, you can still get the GT350.
Yeah, which is no slouch. That car is a good time.
All right. Kind of, flipping things around from the GT500, as we've been recording, we did get a question in on Twitter from Emir Durfel. He asks, what is the lowest power car you'd buy as a fun drive, having at least 2 seats?
Oh, I mean, come on. Miata is always the answer.
Isn't it,
or an
though?
86.
Yeah, actually, 86. That's not exactly a low power car. I mean, it's 200 horsepower in the Toyota 86 slash Subaru BRZ. But the Miata is even less than that. I think the base Miata is about 155 horsepower. And mine, from 1990 has 116 horsepower, and that's one of the most fun cars I've ever driven.
I think on a more practical level too, the Fiat 500 doesn't have much power at all, but I still enjoy driving them. They're not necessarily fun in that sporty sense. It's a fun car to just wring its neck.
Yeah. Well, actually, what's actually my favorite variant of the 500 is the 500E. Depending on where you live, if you can find a used 500E, which is the electric version of it, it's actually a lot more fun to drive than the Abarth.
Because it's torquey?
Yeah, it's got so much low end torque. that it is just a hoot to drive around. I mean, it's only got about 80 miles of driving range, but in that 80 miles, you will have a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can get behind that. I'm trying to think now. Those are three sort of solid choices.
Yeah. And, the 500E, because it's a used EV, you can get screaming deals on those things. I mean, you can get them dirt cheap, especially off lease. I think you can get 500Es for like $7 or $8,000. That's
a really good deal.
Yeah.
I also like the Mini, the 3-cylinder Mini. That one's all right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're a little pricey. But actually, if you can find, again, a used Mini, like a mid 2000s Mini, or even the R56, I think, which was the second generation of the modern Mini. Yeah. You can probably get a pretty good deal on a used one of those as well.
Yeah. The R56 is, so that, like, if you get the regular one, that's a 1.8 liter 4-cylinder, which is fine. For me, I really liked the S version of that car.
Yeah.
It also depends on what what's your idea of fun? We should just ask yourself that.
Well, and I think that's why I asked the question, what's the lowest power thing you can have fun with? And I think the key is, if the car is small and light enough, you don't need a whole lot of power.
Well, that's true. But what do you find? What's fun too? Like,
yeah, I mean, for me, it's something that I can toss around on, through the curves on a country road.
Yeah.
And for that, having a whole lot of power is really not that necessary. It's more about the handling, and the nimbleness and, the responsiveness of it. As long as it's got a reasonable amount of torque, to accelerate out of curves, things like that. I love an engine with way too much torque, but I can happily get by with something that has a lot less, as long as it can squirt from one turn to the next.
Yeah. And here's where I'm thinking is I've never tried one, but a Mitsubishi Mirage with a manual.
You mean the current generation Mirage?
Yeah. Which is, by all accounts, it's not a good car, right? It's a naturally aspirated 3-cylinder. It's an ultimate economy car, right? It's just this cheap little thing. For me, I find it has a certain amount of charm. And I think, I'm sure the manual in it is not a good linkage and all of that. That's not what it's for. But what I find charming about it is it just will accept the abuse, I guess. I don't know. It's got limited grip. It's got limited power. So you can find the edges of the envelope.
You can explore its limits, at speeds that won't get you thrown in jail.
Right, and it's super cheap, and it's not necessarily a car you would use for everything, right? It's not a great highway cruiser. It'll do it, which I think is, when you look at what that car will do.
It'll complain about it, but it'll do it.
I mean, it keeps up with the American sort of car-centric lifestyle, highway-centric lifestyle, and it was totally not designed for this market. It's not its sweet spot for sure.
I guess, maybe what I would recommend is actually, find a used Honda Fit Sport, first or second generation Honda Fit.
Yeah, that's a good car. Yeah.
I mean, they're, I think the first generation was about 106, 108 horsepower. Second gen was about 116. So that, anything from about 2007 through about 2015, 16, when the new one came out, find it, you can probably get a really good deal on one of those, with the manual transmission. You definitely want the manual. The automatic's okay, but the manual is definitely the preferred option if you really want to have some fun. It's lightweight. It handles fantastic for what it is, and and it's also remarkably practical and roomy. For such a car with such a small footprint, it's got a huge amount of room on the inside.
Yeah, that's a solid choice. I was also thinking.
Well, I mean, my daughter, still drives. Her Fit is now, 11 years old. And she's still, she got it new when she turned 16, and she's still driving it. It's still a great car.
That's not. I mean, that's a pretty good endorsement. They last through new driver all the way to to now. I don't think you can get it anymore either. But I was just thinking the Fiesta ST.
Yeah,
really amusing.
I mean, I would, given that the question was, what's the lowest power car you can have fun with? I mean, the Fiesta ST, you can certainly get them used. You could probably still find some new ones sitting on dealer lots somewhere if you look around. But you can certainly get used ones. I mean, that's about 200 horsepower.
Yeah, it's not super like low powered, but it's also the power is not the thing in that car. And I think that's what I like. That's what I find fun is a car that you can rotate either, with lift throttle oversteer or, by putting the pedal down, you can get some of that rotation. It'll play along with you, and you've got, low adhesion or just a certain amount of grip. And when you get all of those things working together in harmony, that's where the entertainment is. And it's actually very hard on a much higher performance car. Like try that on the GT 500 that we were just talking about. You're going to hit something at high speed. You're going to find the limit at the very wrong time.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, as long as it's, light enough, anything between, 105, 110 horsepower up to about 135, 140, you can have a lot of fun with it. If it's light enough and has some decent tires on it, and a manual transmission, you're good to go.
Just buy like a GT car from the 90s, like an Escort GT, which is not really a great car, but it fits all of those criteria.
Actually, you know what? If you can find an old Focus SVT.
Oh yeah,
from the early 2000s.
Yeah,
they're about 170 horsepower. The SVT crew, did their work on that one. It was generally considered to be one of the best hot hatches of its era. They made them for about 4 or 5 years, I think, in the early 2000s, and you could probably find those pretty reasonably priced as well.
When they stopped making that, they actually made I think it was after the mid-cycle refresh of the Focus, there was the ZX4 ST. It was a very particular Focus model, but it carried on some of that legacy. So yeah, I think we're getting plenty of choices. There you go.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we've done.
And if all else fails, just buy an old Miata.
Yeah. It just that's the default choice, and you're not going to be sad. But I don't necessarily need a lot of horsepower. I want something that handles.
No, that's right. I totally agree.
All right. Well, we've done a podcast. It's number 94. I think we just finished. I think.
Yes.
So we'll be back for number 95.
All right. Talk to you again soon.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say, ahoy, or land ho, and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.